Hey, what's up everybody? My name is Moss, and in this video series, I'll be conducting interviews with observability experts at KubeCon 2024. In this video, I'll be interviewing Aunsh Chaudhari, a product manager at Splunk with years of experience as a software developer, where he worked hands-on with observability tools. Be sure to check out some of my other content from KubeCon 2024, including interviews with other observability experts and session summaries from the event. I've linked those videos in the description below, along with some other videos that are related to the topics that we discussed in this interview. Before we dive into the full interview, I want to give you a high-level summary of some of the key insights I gained from it. Aunsh is a product manager at Splunk who focuses on OpenTelemetry and Splunk Observability Cloud. He started as a software developer where he used observability tools firsthand, and that experience led him to dive deeper into the observability space, as well as open source observability tooling. Here are some of the top insights from our conversation. One of the biggest takeaways from my conversation was just how much OpenTelemetry is shaping the future of observability. Organizations are increasingly adopting OpenTelemetry to unify logs, metrics, and traces under one open source framework. OpenTelemetry also enables vendor-agnostic observability. And a very cool development in the OpenTelemetry community is the declarative configuration specification, which essentially allows you to have a single configuration file for your OpenTelemetry collector, and it makes it easier to configure observability across multi-language applications. The next theme in our conversation was cost optimization. The massive amount of telemetry data in containerized environments is driving companies to prioritize cost-efficient observability. And this means implementing strategies like filtering and sampling to reduce unnecessary data collection, and also using cold storage routing for non-critical logs. The other major theme in our conversation was unified observability. Organizations face operational friction when using separate tools for logs, metrics, and traces. And using a single observability platform can simplify troubleshooting and improve mean time to resolution. OpenTelemetry fully aligns with this theme of unified observability. It provides a standard framework so that you only need to instrument your applications once, and reduces vendor lock-in. We also briefly talked about emerging trends in observability. And the primary emerging trend is the integration of AI into observability tooling. Even at KubeCon, there were multiple presentations that showed practical application of AI in observability. Now that we've covered the key insights from the conversation, let's dive into the full interview. Hey everyone, and welcome to KubeCon 2024. I'm here with Aunsh, and Aunsh is a speaker and also a product manager at Splunk. Would you care to introduce yourself?
Absolutely. Thanks, Moss. Yeah, I'm Aunsh Chaudhari. I'm on the product team here at Splunk, and yeah, my focus over the last 3 years or so have been really engaging with end users, helping them adopt OpenTelemetry and Splunk Observability.
Awesome. And how did you end up getting into observability?
Yeah, great question. So I actually come in from, again, an engineering and a development background, right? So completed my master's in computer science. As I moved into a development role, that's where I was already using a number of different observability and monitoring tools. One of them, coincidentally, was SignalFX, and now known as Splunk Observability Cloud, right? So that's where I got fairly deep into some of the use cases that are critical to me as a service, like a service owner, as a developer. I better understood the concept of metrics, traces, and logs. And I think that kind of engaged, and that also got me more interested in terms of open source, right? It got me more interested in terms of what observability can really solve problems for service owners, DevOps, and SREs. So that's how I got started.
Very cool. Thanks for the answer and the background.
Yeah.
So I wanted to talk a little bit more about the conference and KubeCon. Are there any specific presentations or projects that you've seen here that you think are potentially driving interesting changes in the industry?
Yeah, absolutely. So I think so far, I think it's just been a great place for a lot of folks coming into the picture, really looking at scaling and looking at really deploying their services in containerized environments, right? So you'll see a lot of the folks coming in from the SRE, DevOps communities, and you'll see some projects, again, more specifically, I'd love to speak about OpenTelemetry, of course, right? So we were at Observability Day yesterday, And you'll really see a lot of the focus within the OpenTelemetry community, which is a great project in case you're not aware of that. It really helps really looking at things moving forward. So far, there's been a lot of progress making sure that customers and end users can actually bring in their metrics, traces, and logs, which are the three stable signals at this point, right? And actually be able to send those to the tool of their choice. So I think that's a great project. We saw some great presentations yesterday, and I think we'll continue to see them throughout the conference about OpenTelemetry. I think it's really evolved over the last few years since it was founded in 2019. We've only started to see more and more large-scale end users adopting it. It started to get more stable and mature. One presentation that really stood out is that we've often received feedback from end users that they want to see the onboarding experience, the configuration experience of OpenTelemetry improve. And we did see that we're actually engaging more into file-based configuration, right, for the SDKs as well. There was a talk yesterday that spoke to how we can have declarative configuration come into the picture for OpenTelemetry as well. And I think that's a great space to look out for, right? Early implementations are out, but you'll also see that coming in further on, right? So yeah, I think that was very interesting for me.
Yeah, I love that talk on the new declarative configuration specification. I thought that was really cool. It seemed like there was a lot of great benefits that come from the declarative configuration, allowing you to, have like multi-language. If you have apps written in multiple languages, you can just have a single configuration for all of those applications, which is awesome.
Yep.
And I think my next question, I think you've already partially answered that, so I'll skip this one. It was really related to the trends, and OTel is definitely a big trend here at KubeCon. But are there any other exciting trends right now in observability that you're paying attention to?
Absolutely, yeah. I think you as you think of observability, there are very common terms and topics that really come more and more about, right? You've seen acceleration in data growth, right, in terms of the different data sources that customers and end users are getting data from. In containerized environments, right, you're seeing these ephemeral workloads where you're actually generating massive amounts of data, right? Like millions of data points and logs that are being generated. So the question on a lot of folks' minds at this point is, what is the return of investment that they can get in terms of observability, right? If they're really focused on costs, they're focused on how they can optimize the data volume so that they can really focus on what really matters to them as a business, as an organization, and how can they really improve the ROI in terms of those experiences, right? As you think of the data that is being generated, what's the most that you can make out of that data at some point where you can then drive value from it, right? So I feel that is a very like a key conversation that is ongoing. You'll see a lot of discussions in a multiple presentations, but it's also something that I've personally had multiple end user discussions, right, with customers where they bring up this topic. They want to understand what are the best practices, what are the strategies that they can go about, right? Some prescriptive guidance on being able to handle this data volume more effectively.
Yeah, and you actually gave a great talk yesterday at Observability Day, and you addressed some of the concerns regarding like cost management and stuff like that. What were, and I apologize if you already mentioned some of these, but what were some of the practices? I remember filtering was one, transformations. Are there any other practices that people can implement?
Yeah. I think as you kind of take a step back, and you think of all these use cases, you're actually thinking of, for example, filtering, right? We spoke about that a little bit yesterday. There are scenarios where you're really looking to exclude certain metrics, right, or logs, if they're of too much of a value, like a lot of volume of data that you're actually generating and you're exporting that out, you can filter those logs out with components within the OpenTelemetry collector. Similarly, you'll hear of sampling, right? And that's also a similar strategy where you can, in terms of broader data volumes, and you want to really be more representative of the data that is coming through. That's a strategy that you can also use. There are a couple of approaches that you can take: head-based sampling or tail-based sampling, and that's also a way that you can really cut down on the spans that are actually being sent eventually to your backend. And there are like various approaches to be able to take within head-based and tail sampling as well, right? So that's another thing that I'd like to point folks to look into. Again, there are always trade-offs. There are some pitfalls that we actually spoke to in the session, so I definitely recommend, if you haven't taken a look at that, you can go back to some of the Observability Day recordings, which was one of these sessions as well, right? And another one, I think it's important to also be more cognizant in terms of routing data, right? If you think of any non-critical data that's not right, that you're looking to query on top of, right? That's not critical in terms of real-time monitoring as well. You can always route that to cold storage, right? Think of S3, or you're also thinking of other third-party solutions where you can actually push that data and only pull that in, rehydrate those use cases when you really find value. So.
Yeah, absolutely. You can save a lot of being selective about about where you're sending your data. You can end up saving quite a bit of cost if you're not pushing it to some high frequency retrieval database or something like that,
Yeah.
and instead using object store like S3, like what you were referring to. So moving on to more around implementing observability and the challenges. What are some of the biggest challenges you've encountered when implementing observability in a complex environment?
Yeah. So I think let's start from the point that you get data in, right? It's absolutely relevant. I think that's the first step that a lot of organizations are spending a good amount of time. If you think of the varied data sources and the use cases that they're trying to solve, you can have many different tools, right? You can have multiple tools that you can kind of leverage. You're trying to make the best of, and then leveraging different tools, like best of all worlds. But one of the challenges that customers generally have is just from an operational standpoint, right? We're often speaking about like the licensing or billing of an observability solution. But if you take a step back, you want to also think through what is the engineering or what is the operational cost to actually use different tools, right, for observability. And I think that's something that when we speak to, and you actually hear that from a lot of end users, it's not ideal to be actually using a separate tool for logs, a separate tool for metrics, traces, right? And you ideally would love to just use a single approach to getting data in, right? And actually use a single solution which can actually bridge all of that together, right? You just a single stop shop for all of your metrics, traces, and log solutions. So I think that's one key perspective that I've kind of gained, that we see some friction there. Customers want better guidance, end users want better guidance, and that's where OpenTelemetry comes into the picture, right? It really provides an answer to being something that's vendor agnostic, right? It again doesn't completely silo you down to a specific vendor. You're not using proprietary agents anymore, right? And at the same time, it's also basically built on a set of standards, right, on a data model. So why is this important? I think this basically makes querying, troubleshooting a lot more easier, because you have a good level of familiarity based on the metadata, the attributes, right, that are being generated, right, based on OpenTelemetry, and that makes operationalizing any observability solution a lot easier, right, for your end users who are actually using the observability product. So think of your DevOps, SRE folks, your developers as well, who want to use this solution can now use it a lot easier, right? So I think that's an important challenge that we've seen, that when you use multiple tools, you're having to really learn different things, right? You have very specialized understanding in terms of how you can get things set up and also maintaining it. Whereas if you use a single solution for collecting, generating, and exporting data, I think that really makes it a lot easier, right? So that's definitely one. And the second is the time to value, right? When you actually get started with an observability solution, you want to get value as soon as possible, right? You want to see your out-of-the-box dashboards light up as soon as possible. So you want to reduce configuration. You want to make sure deployment is as easy as possible for some of these agents we're speaking about as well. And that's also a space where the OpenTelemetry project has been really making a lot of strides in, right? So I think that's something that comes out to me as well.
Yeah, absolutely. I mean, in what you say about unified observability, I mean, not only can you say that about OpenTelemetry with metrics, traces, and logs, but also where you're sending the data for instance, Splunk, right?
Yeah.
You have this unified observability platform where you can see related logs, related traces, all in a single view, a single tool, as opposed to having disparate tools that you have to go, oh, I've got to see traces in this tool, I've got to see logs in a separate tool.
Yeah.
So,
yeah.
Thanks a lot for your answer. Have you encountered, like, when you're implementing observability in an organization, have you personally encountered resistance from teams? And if so, like, how have you overcome resistance to adopting observability in an organization?
Yeah. I think at a higher level, again, it comes down to really portraying the value and the ROI that a customer can get with an observability solution, right? So we've often seen where customers are very much aligned with the existing tools that they're already using, right? They find value with already monitoring, let's say, out of their cloud provider solutions for monitoring, right? So think of they're already sending in metrics the way they are, and they're using cloud provider solutions. They don't see the value of having an additional observability solution, which can actually get them started. And we've heard of that, right? What is the additional benefit that they can get? But I think and I think that's an important piece to think about. That again, it comes down to a single place, right? You want to be able to have a single pane of glass for you to actually bring all of these insights together, right? And I think that's where you'd see tremendous value in adopting an observability solution where you no longer are really having to really when there's somebody on call, right? Think of somebody who's really in that wartime kind of a scenario, and they're coming in and they really want to get to the root cause of a problem, right? I think really putting that across and really walking you through that end user journey has often been very helpful in really convincing end users and making sure they understand the value they'll get from an observability solution. They're actually going from the point of hours or if not days of actually resolving a solution, which causes tremendous impact to their business, right? When it comes to downtime, to a matter of minutes, right? To actually get to the root cause and then immediately getting their business solutions up and running back for their customers. So an observability solution can really get you tremendous ROI in that respect, right? And it's also important that if you don't have a good strategy around observability today, right, it can basically hamper your business in multiple aspects, right? So that's something to keep in mind, that really taking a step back, looking at what the standard workflow or how is the current service owners, how are your DevOps engineers being able to respond to a current issue with your production system, and how they can get to, if they actually have a good observability solution, right? The before and after will really give you a good perspective of the value you can get.
Absolutely. So you're saying, like, emphasizing the value that observability brings with respect to maybe even like showing MTT X metrics drastically improving, right? Showing an example where you can resolve an issue that previously would have taken days in just a few minutes because you have an end-to-end observability solution implemented.
Absolutely. Yeah.
You've already mentioned OpenTelemetry, and we know that it's a really big theme at the conference. But what's your take on OpenTelemetry's vendor agnostic approach, and what's the biggest value add it brings to an organization?
Yeah, great question. So I think, I spoke about this earlier, keeping in mind, since OpenTelemetry is vendor agnostic, right, end users no longer really need to implement proprietary agents, right? They're not locked down to a specific vendor when it comes to the approaches that they take, right, to actually get data in. They're not reliant on their roadmap, right? They're no longer siloed to certain expertise that is only specific to that particular vendor, right? Now, if you think of the value that this brings you, with OpenTelemetry, since it is, again, open source, it's vendor agnostic, you can actually get started and you don't have to explicitly re-instrument again and again, right? So think of all the toil that you need to take with getting data in when you even want to switch from one vendor to the other. With the approach that we're looking at from a vendor agnostic standpoint, we're actually moving the entire like the value or the differentiation that a vendor can bring from the getting data in piece or the data collection piece to where the differentiation should actually lie on the analysis, on really the troubleshooting and querying experiences that we can provide at scale, right? So I think that's very important to consider, that I feel OpenTelemetry's vendor agnostic stance can really help you get to that point, right? Where you no longer need to come back and instrument your applications again. Once you do that, that's it, right? And then I think beyond that, really thinking of other advantages, since it's just an open source, open standards based model, right? It really makes metadata extraction, it makes really the consistency of all of the data that's being collected. There's tremendous value because now troubleshooting, querying, metadata correlation becomes so much easier within a vendor, within an observability solution, right? So, yeah, I think it's a great project and a great approach to take up and really leverage for getting data in.
Awesome. Thank you so much for your answer. I have one final question, and no worries if you don't have an answer for this one, but do you have any unique or surprising observability use cases that you've encountered and you'd like to share?
Unique or surprising? I'll need to give that more of a thought. Yeah. Let's see. Unique or surprising? I wouldn't say it's any longer unique. So, but it's obviously a trend that everybody's aware of, right? I think it's just something that we're also seeing a lot more interest in OpenTelemetry, but generally across the board with everything, with an AI boost across the board, you're obviously seeing a lot more interest there in seeing how we can also monitor LLMs, right? And really get into more detail associated to that. But again, it's fairly early stages. We're kind of getting more depth in how we can kind of provide more visibility to customers through observability there as well. But I think that's a great space to look out for, right? Especially where we're at and where we're headed. So,
definitely. I really appreciate the time that you spent with me. Thanks a lot. I hope you have a great time at the rest of the conference. And thank you, everybody, for watching this interview. And be sure to check out his session that he had yesterday. I'll be sure to link his session in the video description below.
Awesome.
Thanks again.
Thanks, Moss. Yeah, appreciate it.
I hope you enjoyed this video, and if you did, we'd love to hear your feedback. Be sure to check out some of my other content from KubeCon 2024, including interviews with other observability experts and session summaries from the event. I've linked those videos in the description below, along with some other videos that are related to the topics that we discussed in this interview. Thanks for watching.